Greenwich, Connecticut.
Kids move, families move. You know, it's part of life. It wasn't the move. What it was you have to understand kids know what's going on. Nothing has to be said. Nothing was ever said, in fact, about anything in our family. People didn't, it was verboten to talk about feelings. Nobody talked about feelings. But we knew, on some subliminal level, the way kids do, that life was becoming unraveled.
And I went back east, and everything changed. Suddenly, the withdrawing part of my mother became much more severe, much more noticeable to me.
When we moved to Greenwich, things took a turn for the worse in Frances's life. And I remember she took up sculpting in clay. And I remember that very clearly that she became less and less visible. She kind of retreated. I think, you know, she was probably undergoing a nervous breakdown.
Suddenly I'm in this dark place. I'm in this place where you don't see this where we lived in California.
Peter started to act out, you know, even more than he had before, scrawling on the wall, "I hate the East," and the more he did it, the angrier Dad would get. I mean, it was just anger, constant anger in the house. You know, again, instead of finding out, well, they didn't need to dig very deep to know what was wrong. They knew that the marriage was coming undone and my mother was losing her mind.
And finally, as it turns out, this great dramatic moment occurred. Now, she had gone to some kind of sanitarium, and she was in this terrible depression.
As I close my eyes now, I can see her black dress, her black hat and veil, and her black shoes.
I think she got her hands on a razor blade and slashed her throat. Well, I mean, you can't imagine a more dramatic and awful. And I remember that we children were roundly advised to keep our mouths shut, that Jane and Peter were not to know that this is the way they were told that she had died of a heart attack. The children are not seeing newspapers. They will never know exactly what transpired. And indeed, that's the way it was for years. They had no idea how their mother died.
There was very little empathy or understanding. It's not that people didn't want to be, they just didn't know how.
I don't know what she was lacking in her life, and it's something that I have put to rest in my mind. Whatever influence they had, whatever disillusionment, so whatever happened, it went to the grave with the elders.
You know, it's the kind of thing like I'd be making a movie like Any Wednesday, you know, sort of a pert, all-American comedy, and he would be making Hell's Angels and come over of a night with his guitar and tell me how they just did a scene where there was a gang rape in a church. And I'd be like, oh my God, I don't believe this. I was kind of square.
By 1966, Jane Fonda had become a star, having appeared in more than a dozen movies, including a handful of French films directed by her husband, Roger Vadim.
Jane became a big star, and she went off to France. She married Vadim. And then she came back to Los Angeles with Vadim. And I remember that Peter was very involved. It was Peter who was into the cult thing, into the underbelly of Los Angeles. He was always miles ahead of everybody else.
Brooke has been quoted in a number of books saying that I was jealous of Peter, which is completely wrong. I have never felt jealousy for Peter. I felt behind and asking him if he thought that maybe he could help me catch up, or that I need to catch up, or those kinds of things. But we are so different, Peter and I, that jealousy was not an option. It didn't. She's wrong.
We know we're changing. We understand the word change. Before, it was the dirtiest word that the establishment knew. Now that we're becoming the establishment.
And his ideals. The opposite was happening with his sister Jane, who starred in such topical films as Julia, Coming Home, and The China Syndrome. Their personal relationship was affected by events happening a world away from Hollywood.
I saw Peter much more when I was married to Roger Vadim. When I left Vadim and became an activist, Peter wasn't part of that journey.
Well, I wouldn't have gone to North Vietnam and had my picture taken with anti-aircraft gunners smiling. But Jane did what she thought she had to do.
Then I married Tom Hayden, and Peter didn't like Tom. So we didn't see very much of each other.
And he also spent a lot of the 70s sailing around the world on a sailboat. That was his real passion.
Well, it makes me a whole bunch calmer for the next film. After one film, I come here, relax, kick back, go sailing, then I go off to the next film, and it makes it a little bit easier. I don't pay the money to a shrink, which would really make me feel terrible.